If the Caird did not succeed, they were unlikely to survive. On April the 22nd, 1916, McNish finished his work and the weather cleared. As they launched the Caird to be loaded with supplies, a mishap occurred. The sailors took it as an ill omen. McNish wrote later,
"As we were getting her off the beach, a heavy surf came up. She almost capsized. As it was, she emptied myself and Vincent overboard."
Soaked, the men had to swap clothes. The Caird was moved offshore to be loaded. 2 tons of stone ballast were rowed out for stability in towering seas. Kegs held water from ice laboriously melted over a blubber flame. The party took food for 4 weeks. Beyond this, they knew they could not survive. With his pocket camera, Hurley captured the men's farewell. It was a brave front. Wilde led them in 3 hearty cheers. On board the Caird, Worsley was not fooled.
The men ashore formed a pathetic group. As long as they thought we could see them, they kept up a wonderful appearance of optimism and heartiness.
Then, seeing some of the party in tears, I immediately set them all to work. Own heart was very full. I heard one of the few pessimists remark, "That's the last of them," and I almost knocked him down with a rock.
Elephant Island receded into the distance as the Caird departed. It was a day of rare sunshine and calm seas. Soon the Caird was in rougher waters. By the second day, the weather grew severe, and water began pouring into the little boat. It was uncomfortable, even for men as unflinching as Worsley.
Bruised and soaked, with never a long enough interval for our bodies to warm our steaming clothes, our feet and legs had swelled and began to be superficially frostbitten, with the temperature at times nearly down to 0.
Their tenacity in foul weather and poor clothing astonishes present-day explorers.
The most amazing thing to me is that they didn't have sea boots. Of all things that you need to keep warm feet, if all the rest of you is in a terrible state, and they had no sea boots, their feet were soaking wet. We've been hypothermic, even with modern kit and good stuff. And then when you get hypothermic, you don't even think straight. You start making bad judgment. And somehow through all of that, they took their sights. Shackleton made the right judgment. They kept cheerful, they whistled, they sang.
McNish alone attempted to keep a sea log, but on the 9th day, abruptly, he broke it off. Bailing, pumping, working the sails, every moment they fought to keep the Caird afloat. They worked round the clock in 4-hour shifts. 3 men vainly attempting to sleep on the rocky ballast below, 3 others on watch above. Their frail craft bobbed on the world's most tempestuous seas.
They were a 22'6" little rowing boat, and it is absolutely staggering, the height of the waves. I mean, there were some incredible waves, and some which might nowadays be called non-negotiable waves, where you'd head up to the top, and you might not even get over the top, and you'd slide back down. So it was an extraordinary journey of survival.
In the end, everything depended upon Worsley. He had learned his navigation skills in the high seas of the South Pacific. But nothing could compare to the challenge confronting him now. Worsley needed to read the sun's relation to the horizon, but in the overcast skies the sun rarely appeared. The horizon, too, became almost impossible to find behind the waves. To even attempt a sextant reading, 2 men had to steady him as the boat pitched and rolled.
You mustn't forget, every degree mistake you make is 60 miles of latitude, and they only had about 10 miles leeway in 800 miles in order to reach safety.
In those 800 stormy miles, Worsley was able to take sightings only 4 times. The remainder of the journey he navigated by dead reckoning, the experienced sailor's instinctive gauging of speed and direction, or merry guesswork, as Worsley himself called it. On the 10th day, Worsley believed they were over halfway. He noticed how their leader hid his concern.
2 of the party were very close to death. Shackleton kept a finger on each man's pulse. Whenever he noticed that a man seemed extra cold and shivered, he would immediately order another hot drink to be prepared and served to all. He never let the man know that it was on his account.
John Vincent lost his upper lip, frozen to a metal cup.
Oh God, it must have been desperate. That's all I can. It must have been desperate. My father's ears, his 2 ears, suffered frostbite. They were like bones.
On the evening of May the 7th, the 14th day at sea, a piece of kelp floated by. Land was near.
We looked at each other with cheerful, foolish grins. The thoughts uppermost were, we've done it.
But with land in sight, new ordeals arose to test their limits. A wind drove them perilously close to the island's cliffs. Soon this wind increased to hurricane force, descending upon them from darkening skies.
The open boat journey was just one long crisis. But I think the very worst moment was when they were caught in that hurricane off the south coast of South Georgia, because then you were in the worst conceivable position for any sailing ship. That is to say, on a lee shore, no sea room. And how do you claw your way back out of danger? And this incident, this is where Worsley came into his own, because he understood the way a sailing ship worked. And so he performed a miracle there with a round-bottomed whaler whose profession was making leeway, not built for sailing into the wind. Somehow he clawed his way offshore and into the wind. About that time, you mustn't forget, there was a steamship coming to South Georgia from South America, and she found it. Nobody knows what happened, but she found it. Almost about the same time that the James Caird was making land.
The hurricane raged for 9 hours. Then the wind veered, carrying them from destruction. Shackleton recorded,
"We stood offshore, tired almost to the point of apathy.
On the evening of May the 10th, the 17th day at sea, the James Caird sailed into the entrance of King Haakon Bay on South Georgia. In the gathering darkness, the boat ran in on a swell. One of the greatest boat journeys ever accomplished was over. Only the next day did they have enough strength to drag the Caird from the water. Shackleton allowed the men 4 days to recover from frostbite, exposure, and exhaustion. Above them, the hill was green with tussock grass, the first vegetation they'd seen in 17 months.